caregiver support. I already said that family caregiving is a $400+ billion expense. And that doesn't speak at all to the emotional, physical, intellectual toll that being the caregiver of someone else takes, especially parent to child, because it's really difficult to take care of your parent because you're used to, even when you're home, you're used to them taking care of you constantly. You've got this relationship dynamic going on that frequently will make it almost impossible to communicate with that older parent who has chronic issues about what they should do or why. Because maybe it's because they still remember changing your diapers. I don't know what it is, okay? But I've seen over and over again where I explained something to a client no better than their child had already explained it to them 100 times, and suddenly it's a good idea. Well, it was a good idea the first time. It wasn't because it was mine, it was just something that made sense. And that's part of the communications problem that takes place. But the other thing that comes on is it kind of wears you out. I'm focusing on the family caregiver side because I expect most of you deal with, or I don't know what everybody's practice looks like. Most of you deal with families where there's caregiving involved? Fair number, okay? We find that all too many of the seniors don't get care soon enough. That it's getting a caregiver is all too often a response to a crisis that didn't have a really good outcome. We of course, we got the family care, then we got third-party caregivers. Okay? Third party is anybody who's not related to the ill person. Okay? And those break down into a couple of classes, especially with home care. Is we have home care agencies. You've all seen the ads on TV. You know there's a world of difference between those people who are in that business. Some of the third-party caregivers act as essentially a registry. So then they go out and identify people who are willing to be caregivers for seniors. And they get a contract with them, which basically says, we will find you work. And then they go simultaneously going out and looking to find clients who will hire this person that they're acting as an agent for. So those registries, okay, are not paying workman's compensation, they're not paying Social Security, because these people are not their employees. They become the employee of the senior. And again, it comes back to the price issue. Okay? The workers from the registries will virtually always have a lower price. The other side is agencies that the caregivers are their employee. Now, they're responsible for workman's compensation. They're responsible for Social Security. They're employees, so when they don't show up, they're responsible for seeing that somebody does show up. Some of the registries do a pretty good job of that piece. They got enough that they will bring one. But you're assuming when you get a caregiver from a registry, you're assuming all the responsibilities and obligations of an employer. And absent advice, I've never seen a client who had appropriate insurance, was doing the withholding, was doing all the things that they're supposed to, and it becomes really, really important, because if you bring somebody into your home to work for you, and they hurt their back, who's now responsible for the costs of that injury and the long-term consequences of that injury? Who? You are. And so if you haven't done all of these employer-related things that you need to address, they can, that employee that you were trying to save $4 or $5 an hour on may suddenly be the one who owns your home. Now, granted, it doesn't happen a lot, but this is not a lottery you want to win. So, caregivers, 65 million people, okay? 31% of all households report having an adult family member as a caregiver. That's kind of big, that's a big portion of the population, okay? 15 million care for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia. And what we know about this, they mostly don't have any training in how to deal with somebody with dementia. Not even any training how to talk to them, because you can exacerbate the problems by not knowing how to handle the communication with someone who has these kind of cognitive problems. And it's not just a matter of them having memory difficulties. It translates into functional issues, which impacts relationship issues. So there needs to be some training with that. I said 400. I guess it's 450 billion. Okay, it's kind of a big deal. Oh well, somebody else says it's 520 billion. It's a big number. Okay, and that is where the vast majority of care comes from. Places like Atria or Brent. What was that? What were they before they were sold? Brookdale. They're pretty big businesses, but they're a tiny slice of the total caregiving problem. And it's going to get worse. We have a lot of, how many? We got 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day. And that started almost 10 years ago, right? Maybe it was more than 10 years ago. That means there are a lot of baby boomers now in their 70s. And they, of course, be just like their parents, and they're going to stay home and take care of themselves and not spend any money, right? Is that the classic baby boomer? I don't think so. Okay? That was our parents. Okay? The AARP says average length of caregiving is 4.3 years. If you noticed earlier, it's a 20-plus hour a week job. How many of you are eager to take on a part-time job uncompensated for the next 4 years? How many can I got a couple of those if you're interested. No, nobody wants to do that. And what happened, and it's insidious the way it happens. Well, you know, I go for grocery shopping on Saturdays. I take Mom with me. Okay? And Mom really only just drives around the narrow. I'm not picking on anybody. This is, again, I had enough conversation that this is just the way it happens. Mom still drives, but she only goes to the grocery store and this place and that. And she's got 3 places she goes. She knows it by heart. It's really safe. It's not a problem. But Mom's got a little dementia. Okay? So I take her everywhere she goes that's outside of her given range. I'm taking the doctors because she just feels better. She doesn't have to drive. And suddenly, this transfers into this, big part-time job. And it happens slowly. And if you can begin to recognize that this is going on, maybe you need to look at doing some other things, because what happens to caregivers, they get burned out.
Very sad.
It is, it's a really, really important thing to do, but it's really very hard, and it's very impactful to the overall family. Spousal relationship with kids and siblings. You know, there, in fact, there's a book written that I've frequently told people maybe they should read it. You know, the book's called "They're Your Parents Too," because so often what happens is one child ends up carrying most of the burden, and what makes that worse is oftentimes those who are not actively engaged and participating think that they can, from afar or near, have opinions about how it needs to get done, which adds to the stress of whoever's actually the caregiver. I had a woman who gave up a well over six-figure job to come take care of her parents because years ago she promised that she would make sure mom got taken care of. Okay. So I'm telling you things that you probably know, but part of what you have to have is a plan to figure out how to deal with that stress. There is not one right solution. You know, sometimes just a little meditation helps. Okay? The state has come up with some programs to try and help with this: adult family living, foster care, essentially taking a senior into your home, much like you would take a foster child in. Anybody who does this is not doing it for the money, because there's not a lot of money there for it, but it's a way to give a senior who otherwise wouldn't have a home family environment, that kind of environment. Well, we've seen what the numbers are, you know, $40 to $100 a day. That doesn't go very far to take care of somebody in your house, especially if they're having some issues for family members who are giving the care, if part of the client's goals are to maximize their resources for the family, because I want to be really clear. I believe that if you work hard and you created it, it's yours, and you should do with it whatever you feel is best for you. Okay? That said, I find that most people feel better about preserving some of what they've created for their children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews. Sometimes it's their church. Okay? It doesn't matter. And one of the ways, this will sound like crazy, one of the ways we help preserve, again, this all depends on family relationships, player relationships, that we help preserve assets for the children and maybe grandchildren, is that caregiver child or children actually have them enter into an agreement as a caregiver, and we pay them just like we would a third party. And this does two things. It moves money from the senior generation to a junior generation. Okay? We're going to have to pay some income tax on it because you're getting paid for services. But it is, so long as we do this right, it is a transfer for value, so it does not create a problem for Medicaid, and it is one of the significant tools that we use to help people qualify on an income basis for the VA benefit. They need to be written. Because the assumption is that if you're helping mom or dad out, or your aunt or uncle or whatever, or grandma or grandpa, you're doing it because that's what family does. Okay? The compensation has to be reasonable. We counsel our clients to keep track of what you're doing and how long you're spending doing it. Okay? There are lots of, and it's not this, you know, if you have a parent living with you 24 hours a day, that becomes a real challenge, but then we have to document that you're there, and we help you sort that out. Okay? What are you doing? Okay? Everybody needs to sign it. A preference is if you're the agent or power of attorney, that you not be the one who enters into the contract on behalf of mom or dad with yourself. Okay? That's like self-dealing. Not the best route. It doesn't work, it certainly can, but it's not the best approach. We in the powers of attorney we do for most clients, especially if these might be planning issues, we have a way around that so we can still do it with a power of attorney. Okay? Where the service is going to be provided. Do we get a bedroom or a suite, private bath, use a kitchen, counter? It's like a living arrangement contract, especially when you're both living together. Right? Sometimes one of the best things we do is we will work on our plan right now. Mom's essentially going to build her own mother-in-law as part of the new house with one of her sons. Okay? But then we have to figure out, okay, I already got one son who's cranky because he thinks his brother, who's going to take care of mom the rest of her life, at least this is a theory, is getting this big boon because she's doing a mother-in-law addition to his house. So you got to work through that. Okay? Meals, you get meals. Okay? Look, think about it. To be done right, you don't have to have a contract as sophisticated, as complicated as you might see here, but it's the same kind of issues that have to be addressed. Okay? How often are you going to do the laundry? Okay? Oh, transportation. And see, the thing is, you're probably already, at least in the families where we do this, you're probably already doing a lot of this stuff. Okay? You've never, just because nobody's asked you to, you've never sat down and counted it up or thought about it until you say, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. Okay? Yeah, I haven't had any time to myself for X. Okay? My husband is about to leave me because he says I'm never there. I go through a list of these things, okay? It's because you crept into it. Mostly it creeps up on you. Going to pay bills, manage investments, medical care. We've got nurses, okay? Nurses are really great at taking care of the folks, okay? Hopefully I'm not picking on any nurses here, okay? But they get really involved pretty quickly, and there's a high expectation for them to do a lot of things that are really beyond the typical caregiver role, okay? And some of them are really great at being advocates for their parent with the doctors, and others are so used to being told what to do by doctors that they're not good advocates. That's very, and most of our seniors, as they get older, really need help communicating with doctors. Now, I'm calling it advocacy, but it's really about making sure that they're communicating with the doctor everything the doctor needs to know, and they're getting all the information coming from the doctor in a fashion such that it is actually usable to them. And sometimes the only way that really proves to be usable to them if there's somebody else there to help ask questions and then to reconvey that information at a later date. Oh, do you get a vacation? Maybe we should talk about that. Okay? You still get paid. My approach is no, you don't get paid. Okay? Could you? Yes. I've never had anybody thought they needed to get paid to go on vacation. Okay? Oh, and if you can't do it, who's going to? ever think about that? You think your clients who are taking care of mom, they ever think about, oh, what if I get sick? What if what if my job changes and I have to be out of town a lot? What then? Need to consider these kind of consequences. Maybe we should just try it out for a while. But most of the folks we do this, they've already been trying it for a while. We just have them organize it and clean it up a little bit. Maybe sometimes take some things off their plate by getting them to recognize maybe there's a better alternative than them doing it. What if you die? Sometimes children die before the parents. What's the plan then? How would you figure out what a plan is then? Yeah. And what happens if they go into a facility, whether it's assisted living, independent living, what change? Okay? What happens with personal property? Because it's very easy for mom and dad's personal property, especially when you're living together, for stuff to get commingled. And if it goes on for several years, it becomes like, I think that was not. No, maybe it was there. I'm not sure. Okay. How are we going to determine what the compensation is? Our approach is mostly to use hourly. We almost never do lump sum because it's an invitation to an argument with DSS. When you get paid, how do you get paid? Sometimes we have folks who need help, but they've reached the point where they need the help, but they don't have a lot of liquid assets anymore. They have assets like real estate and what have you. So sometimes we then have to figure out how we secure your right to compensation even though you can't get it currently paid. So we have to identify where the pay is going to come from. Oh, and if you're living together, how do we divide up all of those ongoing real costs? So there's some work to this and there's some detail, but when done properly, it becomes much more equitable for the caregiving child in relationship to the financial side of things than we see happening in lots and lots of families. Taxes. Said it's taxable income to the caregiver. It's not a gift. And the Department of Social Services has been known to ask to see the income tax return of the caregiving child. Now, I don't think they're entitled to it, but they think they are. Do we want to argue about it? Well, that is ultimately up to the client. Okay? Deductible medical expenses. Well, that mostly doesn't really work out, and with the fact that medical expenses under this new tax act are not going to be deductible, it really doesn't matter. Okay? There's no gift tax involved because it's remuneration for services rendered. This can be part of that spend down plan. Because remember, where does everybody want to stay? Home. Everybody wants to stay home. Well, many of us need, that's interesting. I don't know what you guys will like about it. The spend down by paying a family member is a lot more palatable than paying a third party or going to a facility. Okay? And we get you to stay home, and you get the right kind of support, that's even better. For instance, I know, and last time I looked, the statistics on 30% of the people that are in the nursing home got there because of a fall. And most of the falls were avoidable if they'd done things differently in the house. If they'd had somebody with them that was actually knew what to do and how to help them out and take care of them. Because sometimes it's a good idea if you're going to be a caregiver, you really need to get some training and understand it's more than just being there. as I said, we tend to avoid lump sum payments, okay? So we pay hourly, and we pay as well as we believe is reasonable and defensible, okay? So these things all come, we bring all these things together depending upon the facts and circumstances to try and move towards a result that the client wants.